and gorgeous, but she wasn't Elizabeth. Unfortunately, Elizabeth was no longer Elizabeth either. The woman he thought he had known, the love of his life, had been incapable of deception. Or so he'd thought, until last week. He flushed the toilet and answered Cheryl over the rush of water. "I think I've been poisoned." Cheryl came to him and put a hand on his chest. "From what?" "Dinner." He pulled away to rinse his mouth under the faucet. The frigid water washed away some of the bitterness, but not the fear, the deep-rooted anxiety that something worse might be yet to come. Like in the emergency room during his residency training, when a local university co-ed, a cheerleader, walked in with flu-like symptoms that turned out to be sepsis. "You're going to be all right," Barnes had assured her, even as a dark rash surfaced on her face and neck. 2 hours later, she died, despite antibiotics, fresh frozen plasma, and every emergency treatment the critical care team could administer. If he lived to 100, he'd never forget that woman's face. When she'd looked into his eyes, he had felt her mortality. Now he felt it again. This can't be happening, he thought. But that had been the theme of the evening. First flirting with another woman, then crossing the line, taking her to his hotel room. It had all seemed surreal, and so did having some toxin inside him that could cause God knows what. "It was probably the escargot or the mussels," he said, trying to analyze his predicament. Why couldn't he have ordered something else? The chef's salad, maybe, but a bowl of roughage hadn't appealed to him. So instead, he'd ordered escargot and garlic butter sauce, and, as an entree, North Atlantic mussels in a white wine broth. The mussel shells had been large and shiny black, as though they'd been buffed. Thick and rubbery, the plump mollusks inside had protruded through the open shells like tropical birds' tongues. Barnes pushed the image from his mind and wiped his mouth again with the towel. Looking at himself in the mirror, he expected to see a haggard reflection. Yet, despite his illness and the effect of 2 decades of smoking, his off-season tan and a full head of hair lent him a ruggedly healthy appearance. "I'm so sorry," said Cheryl, coming to him and gently rubbing his chest. Her touch sent an unpleasant shiver through him, and he placed a hand over hers to stop it. "That's okay. I don't hold you personally responsible." His attempt at humor only made her frown. She stepped back. "What do you think it is? Staph?" He mulled over her question while steadying himself with one hand against the wall. Staphylococcus aureus is a common source of food poisoning, and the toxin produced by those bacteria take effect within a few hours after a contaminated meal. But his symptoms didn't fit. Staph would cause vomiting, but not this headache. He took his hand off the wall to squeeze his temples between his thumb and fingers. "I think it's the mussels." "It could also be something from earlier," Cheryl pointed out. "Something you ate for lunch?" He dropped the towel onto the floor and headed out of the bathroom. "I didn't have lunch." Taking his arm, Cheryl guided him to the bed. She had turned on a small lamp and it cast jaundiced light through the room. Above the headboard hung a framed print of a harbor scene with shimmering water, reflecting streaks of masts and rusty sunlight. To Barnes, the water seemed to ripple within the frame. "Are you going to be okay?" Cheryl put a cool hand on his forehead. "I think you have a fever. We should get you something." Barnes shook his head and felt the pounding increase. A resurgence of nausea accompanied it, and he pulled away to stumble back to the bathroom. Again he threw up, this time mostly mucus and something darker. Bile? "Maybe we should go to an ER," Cheryl suggested, uncertainty in her voice. She had put on a bathrobe and was standing in the doorway. Barnes wiped his mouth with another towel, then tossed it aside. Using the wall to steady himself, he got back onto his feet. "I'm okay." He took a deep breath and ran a hand through his hair, damp with sweat. Putting his head under the faucet, he let water run over his face, then rinsed his mouth. The pounding between his temples eased, giving way to dizziness. "I don't believe this." Water like icicles dripped down his neck and chest. "This could be serious,"